I just shooting her in the face. I think she was a lawyer, from what I understand.
Oh, really?
Yeah, her mother just
Oh,
identified her body.
and a U.S. citizen.
White woman,
Yeah,
bless her
that's
heart.
that's what I saw was a U.S. citizen, 37-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Going to come up in five. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on my home station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you on a really, really tough day and a tough moment. We have been horrified by the shooting of this 37-year-old legal observer in Minneapolis, and I want to talk with you about that right now. We can't get around that. We've been talking about Venezuela over the past few days, and yeah, we should talk about that because I see a through line, everybody, between the kidnapping of a sovereign president, and not just what that did to President Maduro and his wife and their son, but what it did to a people, Attorney Darrell Jones. We haven't gotten over the Kennedy assassination. Whether you vote for a president or not, they mean a lot to you, right? And what's painful is that you know that this was gutting to the people of Venezuela. But this has also been gutting to the people, and by extension, this has been gutting to the Minneapolis community. They're still trying to process George Floyd. And $1 trillion in healthcare cuts, and $10 billion in cuts to childcare. We're processing a lot, and these military adventures that Congressman Thomas Massey said Venezuela is not about making gas cheaper for American people, it's about enriching a few already extremely wealthy people. Paul Singer bought Citgo for a song. What are they doing? And it's not that this country cannot manage their money. We are choking them. That's what sanctions are for. So it's like people saying that George Floyd died of a drug overdose when you choked him to death. How absurd. You're asking me to act like I didn't see what I see. And we've seen this video now. And we've seen the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security rush out and protect her ICE agents instead of protecting the country. That's what's heartbreaking about this, because I expect so much more of these people. I don't have to agree with them politically, but I expect you to behave in a principled way. I think we should ask that and require that of people. I just need you to do right. You don't have to do as I like, just do right. That's all. And then I can live with it. But anytime the mayor has told ICE to get the F out of his town, Mayor Jacob Fry said to ICE, get the F out of Minneapolis. And I heard him say it live. And oh my goodness. He said, don't you tell them. Don't let them tell you. They are doing this to create safety. They need to leave Minneapolis. So, as I cough, Darrell Jones, what did you see?
Now, I think from what I saw, Mayor Fry was right on point. And the thing is, I don't look at this in isolation. I'm not looking at Minneapolis in isolation. I'm looking at it from the lens of what happened in Chicago. I'm looking at it from the lens of what happened in Los Angeles. I'm looking at it from the lens of what's happened in the District of Columbia. There's a pattern that's there that any fool, right, that's watching this knows that ultimately someone's going to get killed with the way that the ICE agents have been behaving. Now it has happened. And the question becomes, what now? What now? Because really, Santita, in my mind, what has been set up is the question of, will the state's attorney that sits in Minneapolis bring charges against the ICE agents for the killing? That's the question that really needs to be brought forward and centered. I get upset when, and I guess I shouldn't, but when we have a secretary, Nome, who has not stepped back to say, let's have a full investigation before I make a statement. Let me see all the tapes. Let me hear the witness accounts of what went on before I make a statement. That's what we deserve as citizens that wanting to be protected by both our federal and state government levels is do an adequate investigation, find out the facts, and then give us the analysis as to whether or not the person acted lawfully, unlawfully. From what I saw in this tape, I didn't see where Renee Good, the young lady that was the driver, necessarily did anything to try to endanger anyone's life. I did see someone who perhaps was afraid and started to back up and try to gear or turn around, steer away from a problem.
But
If
wait a
you
minute,
have,
wasn't she getting conflicting directions? I thought I heard on the tape one ICE agent told her to stop, another one told her to back up.
absolutely, and
Okay.
that's typical. That's typical what they do, right?
Well, what are
When
you
they
supposed
throw
to
it all
do?
out at you and you're confused as to what to do. So she tried to do what she thought was right, which is to try to back up and get out of the way. And she ends up being killed. The ICE agent leaning into the windshield, shooting through her windshield to kill her and shoot her in the face. Well, Santita, all of this is problematic. It's problematic in my mind from the criminal framework. I see a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I think the only way they really get answered is before a grand jury that should be impaneled there in Minneapolis to talk about whether or not this was murder. Because in my eyes right now, it looks like a murder, Santita.
As a former prosecutor, what go back to Secretary Nome because she jumped out ahead of the story, Attorney Woods. The first for you, Attorney Jones. She jumped out ahead of the story before anything was fresh. I mean, everything was fresh before we knew really well. Of course, the thing is, the story was already out there because people recorded it on their phones and they put it out there. So
Right.
I'm glad that corporate media had to catch up to the people
Mm-hmm.
so that they could. Yep, that's right. I see this from her mouth, Attorney Tanya Woods, because that's what they would have done. They were ready to do that. They're cheering on the invasion of a country right now. I mean, which is unhealthy for us as a people.
We're
So
being so polite with our language, aren't we? Problematic and unhealthy. It is
I just,
downright
I just am not going to
abhorrent.
use the language that the mayor used today, although I completely understood him when he said, get out of here.
It's problematic when your puppy tinkles on the floor.
Okay.
That's
But
problematic, right?
when they
What
do
we are
something else.
seeing is treacherous. It is abhorrent.
Was this
It
bound to
is
happen, Attorney
diabolical
Woods?
even.
Was this bound to happen?
I hate to say so, but yes, because so much activity has gone unchecked. And we are talking about what's happening in isolation. We are not this show, but we are not shouting loud enough from the rafters about the events that we are seeing. And as co-counselor just mentioned, this is not an isolated incident, but we're talking about it like it's isolated incidences, right? We are having discussions in pockets. With the exception of your show, there are I don't see many others that are bringing this message far and wide across this country, nay, across this globe. So yeah, because what you do in the dark, if nobody ever shines a light on it, eventually you'll be able to keep doing what you're doing. And the recklessness that they showed in Chicago was only bound to be repeated in other places. The comment that got me was the snow on the ground. There was snow on the ground, she said, right? There was so much snow on the ground and it was dangerous. And for those of us who live in the Midwest, when we saw that video, that's like going to work and going to school everyday streets. That's not snow on the ground.
And said their car was stuck in the snow, Tanya. Their car was stuck in the snow.
Stuck in the snow. Right. So the small little embankments that we see on the side, that is not problematic. It would not have caused rise for the kind of behavior that she's condoning. And to your point, Santita, long before any investigation, because you are so emboldened to know that you can continue to act unchecked, why would you ask for an investigation? You know, why would you think that that's what you have to do? Certainly the American people are not crying for it. The American people to whom they believe that they are accountable to, right? They're not asking for an investigation. You know, there are people in communities that are just flicking the channel. I guess that's over. I guess I'll look at Netflix now and going on about their lives. So was it bound to happen? Sadly, in my heart, I feel as though there's probably more violence yet to come, because anytime you can, there's not even a high-speed chase in this. How fast would the car have to have been going? I mean, let's just do the science on that. In order for her to roll back, to knock you down, to then harm you in such a way that you felt like you had to use deadly force, the car's not even going that fast. So,
But
I mean,
how
it
did
just
the
makes no
secretary
sense that
say?
that was the kind of violence that you would meet it with. And as you pointed out, counselor, the leaning on, you leaned in for that kill.
But no, but Attorney Woods, wait, and Attorney Jones, they said that the Secretary of Homeland Security said that the car was weaponized. We saw the video. It was not moving far at all, and she was backing away.
Absolutely. But that's the
Yeah.
same kind of false narrative that when in Chicago at California Avenue, right off the I-290 expressway, that they tried to say was happening in that incident. But there was so much video, back to your point, Santita, the people's video, there was so many people that were using their cameras to video that incident. There was no, they tried to do the same thing in Chicago and release a false narrative and a false story about what was actually going down on the West Side. But there were about 14, 11, as my grandmother would say, videos that spoke to the contrary. And so days later, there was a very slow, very quiet backpedal that was not covered widely in the news. It was barely a footnote, not even a citation that said, oh, that's not what had happened. And I'm saying that on purpose. I'm using that language and that grammar construction on purpose, because for those of us who live in that community, we know what that means.
Right.
Right.
And
So
Santita, I'm sorry.
ahead, Daryl.
I wanted to take a step back for just a second, Santita, and I want to congratulate and thank the citizens in Minneapolis that listen to Attorney Woods and I. As we constantly say, have your phone ready, record what you see. Because if they did not do that, what we're talking about, the story that would have been spun, is the story that would have stayed. Rather
That's
than
right.
they've got to give account for the story, for the lies that they've told, to try to make it account to the stories that the citizens recorded. They
That's
didn't have
right.
a bias recording this story. They didn't have an A team and a B team. They had no team. They had no dog in the fight. They just wanted truth. They wanted justice to be served. So certainly hats off and thanks to the citizens for doing that. Now we need them to take the next step, which is to get their state's attorney to prosecute the case, to take the case to a grand jury, for a grand jury to decide if what happened is justified or not. That's the next step, Santita.
Well, just given what we've seen, my question then is, what is the likelihood that, how will this case be handled? I mean, because is this a federal case? Is this a local case? Well, how is this going to be handled? You've got the federal secretary who's basically giving the ICE agents cover, and you've got the mayor and the police department saying, no, this did not happen the way you said that it happened. I mean, they were in real time. They were in real time at odds. I'm not contradicting each other. They were at odds with each other. It was quite extraordinary to see that. So help me to understand where we go from here. Who's going to have to walk things back? Attorney Jones, Attorney Woods.
So I'll start by saying this much. There are going to be multiple ways to attack this, because what we do know is we're in uncharted territory. What we do know, and I'll just use Chicago as a replay. Chicago had both ICE agents and Border Patrol, and that now we can kind of stand back for a little bit and unpack some of the law on this, if you will. And we were using them interchangeably, but they're slightly different, right? Border Patrol was in Chicago because there was a conversation about the fact that we border the Great Lakes, is that we were actually on the border, an international border, because there was the Great Lakes, there's Chicago, and there's Canada on the other side. So there was a whole conversation and in the court of law about whether or not border patrol shouldn't even be in Chicago. And they're having that discussion in other places because what was eventually would be determined in Chicago was going to send a signal to other cities across the country. So let's take Los Angeles, right? Who's much even closer, but we're not San Diego borders Mexico, not Los Angeles, right? But again, these are some of the tricks that are being played. So the short long answer to your questions is depends. I think what you'll see is you're going to see any number of complaints being lodged in multiple courts of law, much in the same way that we see the opposition just lobbing everything just to kind of clog up the courts of law, but also to see what sticks and to draw the card of the jurist that's sitting on the bench to determine what's going to be precedent and what's not. Because then other jurisdictions will look at those rulings to determine which direction they will go if they see the same type of implementation of these immigration policies enforced in their cities. So it's a long way of saying we don't know, but there could be multiple complaints that are filed in multiple jurisdictions, both state and federal, depending on what the strategy of some of the advocates and activists are in that area.
And Santita, I would add that if I am in Minneapolis, I am pushing my state's attorney, I am pushing my prosecutor to go to the grand jury and move forward with it on the state level, because I don't trust the federal government. I just don't trust that they'll do the right thing. They've already shown you that they won't do the right thing. So I am pressing, the prosecutor in Minneapolis to move forward to taking this matter to a grand jury. If through some procedural gimmick, the federal government is able to short circuit what I'm doing, at least I'm putting my fight up. I want to get the evidence. The people in Minneapolis elected a prosecutor to get out there and to fight for them. One of their co-citizens has now been killed by an ICE agent. Let the prosecutor do their job and push forward to protect the citizens. You didn't hear that ICE is leaving Minneapolis, so they're still there. Matter of fact, there's another 2,000 of them coming or something along those lines.
Absolutely.
That are coming there. This is even more of a reason for you to press those charges, to go to the grand jury to say, I've got to protect my people. You have the governor saying the people need to be protected. You have the mayor saying the people need to be protected. They need to go take this to the grand jury to try to force ICE to stand on the charges of murder of this young lady.
And you all may have touched on this already, but we know that, and I think I did hear a little bit of the conversation about the Somalian community that's in that area. And Santita, I give you all the credit in the world for ringing the alarm and raising awareness around Black immigrants. I didn't see anybody else giving the attention like you have over the last several months about the impact that the enforcement of these immigration policies was going to have on Black immigrants. And here we are in that moment.
No, I'm following you because you what you know, I mean, I can't take any credit for that. I'm sensitive to it. Yes. But I think
you gave us a platform to talk about it, and that cannot be underscored.
Well,
because without that, it's just me and Daryl talking across, in the corner.
We have to do that. I mean, because there is a tension that exists. And I think we have tried to use this platform to talk about that tension, because the only way that we're going to be able to work our way through it is to talk about it, to talk our way through it, and to really understand. I was reading an interview. Keith Ellison, the Attorney General for the state, former Congressman Keith Ellison, was speaking with Ilhan Omar when she was looking at running for Congress. And he was helping her to understand, the ins and outs of running for office and the different communities. And okay, but this is the Black American community. These are our sensitivities. You need to understand slavery. And she drew a blank. She said, what do you mean? He said, see, that's an issue, because that's central to the Black experience in America. I had Dr. Cornel West on a couple of hours ago, and he was talking about Mir Mamdani in New York, and we were praising him think he's magnificent, and I think that he's well intentioned. But I was sitting with my mother, and I'm her child, so you know, I think a lot like her. And we were at an event, and it was a campaign event, and they were saying that it was an African American who said, this is a country that was built by immigrants. And my mother said, "Oh, absolutely not. We built this country. Immigrants came here for work. We worked the land. We built the White House twice. We built everything you see in Washington. The whole foundation of the country was
I've
built."
had to make that correction too, Santita, before about immigrants
Yeah.
building this country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the tension, and then no one wants to be black, right? People, because that's the last thing you want to be in America, and we're the only people who can't be anything but that. Which I would never want to be anything but this. But that having been said, everybody else can move into whiteness, and other people do. And there is a tension between the Somali community and the Black American community. And now, well, and to be fair to them, they come here, and I think that they have seen blackness in a way, because to be fair to them, they don't do the black white thing on many levels where they are, because they're all black people. White supremacy, yes.
This is learned
It's
behavior, and it's taught
Yeah.
behavior. So you make a very valid point about people's country of origin and whether or not they are familiar or have any firsthand knowledge of that tension between black and white because of the places that they come from.
Well, and
Where
the tension between them and Black
that is
Americans.
correct. Right. And I think I've shared on this program before, and talking to many of my friends in the immigrant community from various places around the world, whether it be the Pan-African diaspora, the African diaspora is in Latin America and South America. But the fact that our history is not taught by us to those other people. Our history in this country is taught through the lens of white oppressors. And so everything that is learned about African Americans and our contributions or lack thereof is taught through the lens of the white oppressor. And so they cannot help but have a narrative that is so derogatory, so ill-advised, so erroneous, so degrading about African Americans. Imagine if we did not have the access that we have to information that was both unbiased and balanced, how we would feel about people, right? I literally was watching a game show, what was supposed to be a game show, a reality game show the other day. And some of the contestants said to themselves, all American, there were a couple of British nationals. And they said, we're gonna make teams based on our nationality. And I just thought to myself, we're gonna put the Brits over there and the Americans over here. And I just like, really, we're doing that in 2025, right? Like the xenophobia is so entrenched in America that sometimes we can't not think about ourselves in terms of this and that, us and them. And so it's a wonder that anybody from any country, but certainly those in the diaspora, have any knowledge about what we've actually contributed to this country. I was just talking to another colleague, and I gave some books that were African-American history and some fiction and some nonfiction alike for her daughter, who is a teenager interested in learning more about all kinds of history, who is not from the diaspora. That's a great conversation that two people can have who are not from the same background, but are willing to learn from one another. How often does that happen? Very rarely. And so you do have tension, Santita, that is often, in my opinion, on purpose. But until you intentionally decide to want to do something different, to learn about each other, to be open to ideas, to say, yeah, I want to learn more about your history and your culture, because I don't know anything. All I know is what white folks have taught me. That is the kind of curiosity we should be having with each other, so that we can fight the common oppressor, which seeks to keep us all down by keeping us divided.
And ironically enough, we're going to pay a lot of attention to this, because this is a white woman. But first of all, I think that her murder, and that's what this is. This woman was shot in the face, and my goodness, her mother had to go identify her. Pray for that woman today. She never expected that she have to go identify her baby. having been shot in the face. That is a horror. But it reminds me of maybe we're having a Viola Liuzzo moment, a Reverend James Reeb moment from Selma, where it wasn't that Jimmy Lee Jackson's death was not inconsequential. It absolutely was. It kicked everything off. But there was another, I think, quite frankly, to be fair, Americans of every background have objected to ICE, and some have supported. But many white Americans have objected to this. Many, many. I wonder, though, how the killing of this woman might shape the ICE narrative. You understand what I'm saying? I'm wondering because she's 37. She was a legal observer. I just saw a couple of weeks ago, just before the Christmas holiday, a white woman, a resident of Minneapolis. You could see she looked to be middle class, just solid, just woman in the just working woman. And she said, in my neighborhood, when we hear that ICE are coming, we get an alert on our phones and we go outside and we start blowing the whistles.
Right.
She had been arrested and was held without charge for several hours. I said, well, wait a minute, something's going on up in Minneapolis. And now they killed this young woman. Oh my goodness, God bless her family today. Because as a legal observer, she was trying to keep them on the straight and narrow. And she was shot in the face. I'm trying to wrap my mind around, because I saw the videos on X, trying to wrap my mind around them shooting this girl in the face. More than one time. What was he thinking? What is this?
But Santita, we have normalized violence as an appropriate and legitimate response to conflict so much now that there used to be a time, I can remember growing up, and we thought that if on the instance that a police would draw their weapon, it was to shoot them in the knee or shoot them in the elbow.
To disable them, right?
To disable them. That's kind of the narrative I remember as a kid. What I have since learned is that from officers today, that is not what they are taught. There is no conversation about shooting somebody in the knee. They are not trained to shoot somebody in the pinky toe. They are shooting to kill. So that means that all level of conflict is met with the same response. That's how we have normalized this type of violence. There's no more fist fighting. There's no more any other kinds of responses other than gun violence. And yet the gun violence prevention programs are directed as us, as if we're the ones making the guns and distributing the guns, when in fact the violence is being taught to us and to our children as the only way to resolve conflict. And so it is no wonder that we would see this type of violence happening regardless of who is being perpetrated on, but in such a wanton fashion, as if that's the only appropriate response when you can't get your way, is to shoot someone in cold blood, but shoot with the intent not to harm, not to maim, not to disable, but literally shoot to kill. That is truly the disturbing part to me, because we are continuing to say that that's an okay response to meet conflict. And we continue to teach this and continue to not raise, in my opinion, as loud of alarm as it should be.
And Santita, you talk about the response that you are anticipating, or people are anticipating, because it was a young white woman that was shot and killed in Minneapolis. And, I think that there's a great deal of identification that goes along with the activations. And that is that a lot of times, historically, if it's a Black person that's going on, if it's George Floyd, that's a Black issue, the Black people get out there and take care of their own. And now that we've seen sort of this evolution now of the pressing of democracy on white America and the response of that, And when I say the response of that, I mean, when we're talking about the hands-off rally, that was primarily white, because they saw white people that were upset with seeing what was happening with the democracy and the attacks on the democracy. The whole No Kings rally, right? All the No Kings are primarily white, right? Because they're attacking pieces of what most of majority of white America, whatever, however you want to label it, is saying is an attack on them. And so this is their response. And I think similarly with the whole ICE piece here and the ICE response, now that it has killed a young white woman in Minneapolis, I think you're going to see that same growing response to ICE. There's already been I think a response in the white community to ICE as it stands, that they are out there in the streets. I know that in DC they get out and they beat the pots and everything else to alert people that ICE is there, and they've created all the other things that are going on as alerts. I think now you're going to see, as a result of this, an increase in that. You're going to see an upsurge and folks that are getting involved and that want to get into the streets and want to peacefully protest. And let me really put my thumb on the scale on the word peaceful in these protests, because I still believe, as I said earlier when they initiated the National Guard and ICE and these stops in DC and then in Chicago and other places, what they're looking for, what the administration is looking for, is justification to go full hog, full everybody in, all the military in to these cities, so they can have some type of martial law and some type of control over these cities. We cannot allow that to happen. And the killing here of Renee Good, we don't want that to be the touchstone of the response to be for the community to get so upset that there's a justification to send more military in to Minnesota. That would just be, I think, playing into the hands of what they want to have happen. With Kristi Noem and her response, her jerk response, or knee-jerk response to what has happened, it's not inconsistent from what we saw happening from Kash Patel, trying to get out in front and tell a story before knowing what the substance and the actual occurrence and facts are. So I think that we've got to be careful, and that we want to be certain that the community responds, but they respond in a peaceful manner. They respond in a manner that does not open the door for the administration to say we're sending in troops because of all the problems that are going on in Minneapolis and in the state of Minnesota.
I mean, there's no question about that. But now I'm seeing in the chat line, and I'm seeing as I'm looking at the news, according to a young man who won the Democratic nomination, Omar Fateh, the Minnesota state senator, and other organizers, they reported that federal law enforcement at the scene prevented medical aid from being administered to Renee Good.
And where have we heard that before? To your
Help me
point,
to understand that.
these are not isolated incidents. There are more aggregations of the same, because we have certainly heard that narrative before. Somebody asking, I can't breathe, let me up, and being somebody passed out, somebody shot, not letting them in. We just had it, so we can fill in the blanks on how many times we've heard that story. Unfortunately, I hope we don't become desensitized to that story and start to accept this as the norm. So I hear what you're saying, counselor, about not provoking, but I also truly also believe that there is, in our country, we could be sitting down with our legs crossed, crisscross applesauce, and they're still gonna come in and do what they want to do. So I do want people to stay safe and make the decisions that they feel are in their best interest to keep them safe and their families safe. I do believe that there will be pushback on multiple fronts, but we have certainly not seen the end of this. It's wintertime, y'all. So it's just a little quiet right now. When it starts to get warm again, and our people come out and they're in an environment that they're a little bit more comfortable in than the cold streets of Minnesota or Chicago, we're going to see more. And we're going to have to continue to stay on the line and raise awareness about what's happening. But also, I want to shout out the fact that we have midterms coming up. And this is an important time for us to talk about electoral politics and the electoral process, and for us to be able to reach out and cast a wide net to those who have found themselves on the fringes of our electoral process have elected maybe not to participate. Maybe those who have participated and voted for somebody who is now acting not in their best interest. But for us to have that conversation with those individuals, so that we can bring as many people out to the polls that are voting in their best interest and that of their communities, and not just tuning in to YouTube to get the sound bites.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, the thing is, if we're going to be citizens and not subjects,
That
if you're a
part.
subject, constitutional monarchy. If you're a citizen, it's a constitutional republic. That requires that you get involved. So, this story, I'm in Chicago, broadcast out of Minneapolis, St. Paul. I am profoundly disturbed by this because I see this as I'm profoundly disturbed by Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just profoundly disturbed whenever I see injustice anywhere. I'm threatened where I am. I am very, very, I think we've got to, because people are out tonight. Because now this is happening at a very interesting time in which 20 million American families are going to be without health care at least. We have seen exploding healthcare premiums just over the past week. We don't even on YouTube look at, they were not talking about making turkeys this year. They were showing you how to make turkey wings. Think about that. People cannot buy houses. Not even close to buying a house. They're talking about a 50-year mortgage, which means you will never ever own anything. But the World Economic Forum said that you will own nothing and you will like it. The Georgia Stones say that 500 million people on Earth. That's it. There are 8 billion people. So I think we need to look at why we don't get shot in the elbow anymore or in the toe. Trust me, hurting feet will cripple anyone. One hurt foot will just ruin your whole day. You don't have to shoot someone in the face. And they shot her in the face in front of everybody.
That's the emboldened part, right?
Come
That is
on,
the
help me.
audacity of it all. That is the I know I can do whatever I want and I will go unchecked of it all. That is why I don't have to launch an investigation before I make a statement of it all, right? That the language is already there. They already have the language to justify the behavior. Anything now is an act of terrorism, right? There are not-for-profits that are literally quaking in their boots right now all across this country for fear that their mission and their purpose that they have been true to for so many years is now going to be deemed an act of terrorism.
Yeah,
Because
and
the
Santita,
definition
it
now is
does
so broad to include anything that's not like us is
right.
now a terrorist act.
And it really does now turn to the people, Santita. And I think that's ultimately what we're saying. We're talking about voters and we're talking about, reclaiming your time, reclaiming your rights. The people in Minneapolis right now have the opportunity to stop this, to put a pin in it, to be a blockade to this affront that's going on. They've got to push their state's attorney. They've got to push their elected official to convene that grand jury to bring people, to hold people accountable. They've got to do that. It doesn't happen because you think that they're just going to do what the right thing is. That's not how it happens. We need to be certain that we're in the streets, that we're making the demand that the prosecutor do it. I don't know the prosecutor in Minneapolis, and let me be very clear about it. I don't know the prosecutor. I don't know if it's a him, a she, or anything else. I don't know. But what I do know is that the power of the people won't quit, and that the power of the people is what can bring forward a grand jury to have facts that are found to find out what exactly happened in this situation and whether or not it was justified. And if it wasn't justified, then the people should sit in a jury to make a determination as to what was it illegal? Was it okay? Was it illegal? Was there a crime that occurred? I personally, from what I've seen, believe there's a crime that occurred and punishment should be merited out. If we don't do that, then we continue to close our eyes to injustice as it occurs in front of us. And that's what we can't do.
Well,
I'll
help
take
me.
this as an opportunity. I'm sorry, Santita, to
No,
make a
please.
shameless plea for anyone who receives a jury summons. This is exactly why you don't try to figure out how to get out of jury duty. Nothing that you are doing is more important unless you align on something that's health related or, very serious in that manner. But if you're just trying to get out of jury duty just because you feel like it's inconvenient to you, please, 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 please respond. That is not only your civic duty, but these are instances that counselor is talking about where your opinion and you weighing in can really make a difference in the lives of not only that person that may be involved in a case, but these cases, as they are ruled, make an impact and set precedent for what happens across the country. Across the country, these judges are sitting on benches in unprecedented times. They are talking to each other. They are conferring with each other, trying to figure out, well, what are you going to do? Well, I don't know what I'm going to do. What are you going to do? The facts of the cases may be very different, but the impact, the ripple effect that the rulings that these will have is going to be felt for years to come. So what we have now in the state of Illinois is a commission that was instituted by our governor, Governor Pritzker, an Illinois Accountability Commission, to actually start collecting evidence and information and data and stories and videotapes so that when that moment comes, when a complaint is lodged, when that moment comes and there's an opportunity to advocate in a court of law, that information, that evidence, those videos have been cataloged and organized in such a way that they can withstand any, in any court of law. So these are the kinds of things that can happen and proactively. And so when I say, please respond to your jury summons, this is serious business. It is not just, a way to go downtown or whatever it may be. It is very, very serious and hinges in some. Here in Cook County, we may have a large percentage of African Americans, of Black folks who can sit on a jury in the state. But if you go to federal court in the Northern District of Illinois, that whole demographic changes because now you are pulling from other communities where, quite honestly, the people may not be as sympathetic as they are in the county in which we sit. So this is serious. These are serious times for us to be engaged at all levels of the electoral process, at all levels of the judicial process, and certainly where it's possible to be able to push back and raise your voice against what we see happening at the executive branch of government.
But let me ask you this. Let me ask you both this because you understand the process of constructing a jury. When you have a case like this, because any of us could be called upon to be impaneled on a jury, is this how do you continue to function? Because you're part of the jury pool if you're a registered voter. Do you not pay attention to the case? Or do you continue to pay attention to the case? And then when you're called in, how do you handle that? Because don't they want people who are unbiased or who haven't watched to be?
I'll let Dale go first and then I'll give my answer.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a practical. Yeah, no. That's an excellent question because you have a lot of high-profile cases, right? O.J. Simpson was a high-profile case, right? And you had to really much be under a rock to not know what was going on in a case like the O.J. Simpson case. The question isn't whether or not you know some of the stuff that is said to have occurred in the case or you heard something about the case. The question is, can you be unbiased? Can you sit as a juror and be unbiased with the decisions that you're making? Have you heard something that has so tainted you that you are now tilted one way or the other? Or can you be unbiased? Can you sit objectively and hear the information, think for yourself, and come to a decision based only on the information that you're hearing at that trial and not from any outside sources? That's the standard that's used. Otherwise, we would never have high-profile cases that get tried in the United States because everyone's heard, something about them. If you haven't heard something about a high-profile case, I wouldn't want you on the jury because it probably means you're not paying attention to anything. So, so there's going to be situations that where information is just out there, and that jurors are going to hear about it. But ultimately, the question is, can you be unbiased in listening to the information that's being presented by both sides in a case?
I have nothing more to add other than just to say that you should always be informed. Your duty is not to be ill-informed. Your duty is not to be ignorant of what's going on. Your duty is merely, as counselor said, to be unbiased in your approach to the case. So I wouldn't want anybody to, unless they are asked to do so by the sitting judge, to be sequestered, that you continue to be informed.
Well, I think Solomon wants some attention today, but I think because you've got two brilliant lawyers here, and quite frankly, um, because people are asking questions. You've had Christy Nome, who's the Secretary of Homeland Security. She came out with a particular narrative, um, and the video told the story too, and that's what the mayor went on, and that's what the police have gone on. And for the record, I've had attorney Linda Bernard on many times. She's part of the family here. She is conservative, very much so. In fact, she is one of the police commissioners of Detroit, and she's welcome here. When I can get her, I get her. Um, that having been said, do you think he says you're ignoring the facts? She used her car as a weapon to strike ICE, and ICE is trained to shoot to kill. And I guess my thing is this, and I'd like for you all to weigh in. Shooting to kill, I think, is barbaric. We're better than that. You can disable someone with a shot toe. Trust me, if you've ever had hurting feet, that is something that can bring you to your knees and certainly put you in a nasty disposition. You don't If you shot someone in the knee, you wouldn't be able to do anything. No, I mean this is not Hollywood. This is real life. I'm not trying to make recommendations. I don't want to see anyone get shot. That having been said, I didn't see the car used as a weapon. I saw someone who was frightened to death, who saw these masked people coming toward her. She's being told, stop, go, stop, go. She said, oh, okay. And then she was shot in the face. Solomon, I want you to jump back in the comments and tell me how you can justify shooting someone in the face multiple times. Please, just help me with that. Tanya, Daryl, counselors, help me.
Well, Solomon has a very unique point of view, and I too am reading his comments along with the other viewers. And I would not want to minimize Solomon's point of view, certainly. Having been a return viewer, we know that Solomon has some very strong opinions about support of, the government's actions. And there are many others that are like Solomon who believe that. You made a comment, Santita, about, we all saw the video, but we've seen other videos.
Yeah.
And I hate to, sound like a broken record, but we'll look at the video and see somebody being beat down within an inch of their lives, and somebody else will see the video and say self-defense, or he was running and so that's why he shot him in the back, right? And as if that's okay. So it's very interesting how our eyes can be trained to see things that support our worldview and our opinions and our beliefs while we're all looking at the same video. And
well, it's
so
like
I don't
George Floyd.
exactly.
I mean, conservatives have said
Rodney King.
no,
right?
he was. Yeah, well, I mean, George Floyd,
the list can go on.
Yeah, no, he was specifically, he was a drug addict, and he died of an overdose.
Out of water in the kitchen, across the room. What kind of magical water is gonna jump across the room and maim, kill, or hurt you to the point that you have to shoot me, right? So there is this disconnect between realities, if you will, that what we see and what other people see supports our worldview on how the world should be managed, who has power, who gets to wield that power, and under what circumstances. And so I just merely say that we need more amplification on shows like yours, Santita, so that we can have more conversations, so that we can, so the Solomons of the world are not necessarily acting in a vacuum, but we actually can have a conversation like this and be able to share viewpoints, but as counselors saying, go beyond just sharing viewpoints, but then be able to take action so that we can have some of this activity, which we called problematic earlier, be checked.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, I don't mind these different viewpoints, but I want you to offer something that is constructive. This is a conversation that is meant to be constructive. I don't want you to troll. I don't think that's not the spirit in which you should come here. And I'm not accusing you of that, Solomon. But some of the things that you say are, I want you to back them up. and then engage people so that people can understand your point of view. Nobody's afraid of a different point of view. Trust and believe. My parents have been together 65 years, and I have seen them have differing points of view politically. 'Cause my father is far more progressive than my mother is. My mother's extremely conservative, and he wonders, how did I end up here? But that's she said, this is who I am. This is who I've always been.
But
So I
Santita,
don't,
you bring up an excellent point,
yeah,
though, right? Is that in this two-party system, we have been led for decades to believe in blue versus red.
yeah,
What I find actually encouraging in this moment is that people are being forced to be curious, ask questions, and hold people
yeah,
accountable. To me, that goes far beyond blue or red. That goes far beyond right or left. That goes far beyond conservative or progressive. So where there is a conversation where people are being curious, where they are asking well-formed questions, and where they are asking for accountability, I say bring it on, right? Bring
yeah,
it on. Because these issues are moral issues. They are ethical issues. They are causing people to think more deeply than perhaps they ever have before. You cannot just run and hide under rhetoric any longer or under the banner of a political party. And so I'm encouraged, actually, because I'm hoping that that curiosity and that desire for accountability will drive people to the polls. I
Right.
hope that will drive people to candidate forums. I hope that will encourage people to ask more questions, so that we actually can get people in offices that represent our best interests and those of our community.
Right. And then a couple of things, if I may, Santita.
hmm,
One, you had previously talked about officers shooting people to disable them or to maim them, if you will, in the leg or a hand or something like that. Generally, when we're talking about the use of force and police officers, they're trained to shoot center mass. They're trained to, if you're going to shoot someone, you're shooting to kill. You're not shooting to slow someone down. That's not the training that's there. If you're going to use your weapon, you're using your weapon to affront a situation that has arisen to the point that has called for deadly force. And so you're using deadly force at that point in time. So one of the questions that the grand jury will be able to take up is whether or not the officer was justified and using deadly force in this situation. And that's the reason that I keep push this matter to the grand jury and let them make a decision. One of the things that Attorney Woods was bringing up, and I wholly and completely continue to push on this. Part of the reason that we tell people to vote down ballot is because you're voting for that prosecutor that's making the decision whether or not to take it to the grand jury. You're voting for the judge that will be sitting here listening to the evidence in that case to make those decisions. So that's why it's important that the people power be recognized, because this is one of those situations where you get a chance to see that the impact of those votes and the impact of those positions are now coming together. You're going to see what happens in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, in this situation. This is what you elected. This is what they're doing. And now, as Attorney Wood said, if you don't like what you're seeing, what they're doing, then you may have the opportunity to unelect them and to go in a different direction. But this is one of those opportunities where you're going to have a chance to see, does your dog, I'm taking y'all back to the country, right? I'm a country boy. The country boys always say, the question for me is, does the dog bark, right? Does the dog bite? Will the dog get the ducks out of the woods, right? Does the dog hunt?
Hunt,
That's the
right?
question
I
that
was
you're
about to say,
asking
the real
right
one is,
now of your
does the dog
prosecutor.
hunt?
Does the dog hunt? Does the dog hunt? If you don't have a hunting dog for a prosecutor, then you need to get a hunting dog that will be certain to prosecute the cases that are in your interest. That's what this is about. This is the opportunity that's being presented right now, Santita.
I'm so glad you elevated voting down ballot. All too often, even one of our viewers, Ari, talked about stopping Donald Trump. And the point you're making, counselor, I think is a very valid one that cannot be stated enough, which is there are many, many, many other offices long before you get to the executive office. There are many, many other races that must be voted in before you get a chance to vote for the president. And those are the races that we must also be vigilant about participating in, engaging in, and asking questions. There are any myriad of rules and restrictions about who can campaign, where they can campaign, what can you put on a website, what you can't put on a website. So it's practically a full-time job to be a responsible voter these days, but it's one that we should all be taking very seriously and should be feel privileged to have, because so many of our forefathers and foremothers fought for us to have this opportunity. And so I see it more, one that we should be embracing, is to be able to ask questions, to be curious, to hold people accountable, to unpack budgets and figure out where the money goes and where the money is and what people are fighting for. I mean, we are in that fight for our lives right now in Chicago while all of this is still going on at a federal level. And so I cannot encourage people enough to connect the dots, and where you have found a connection, share that connection with others. Pay attention to people's voting records. Go to these town halls and candidate forums and ask people questions about what their viewpoints and their positions are on immigration policies and the wanton type of enforcement of these immigration policies. Call names, name names, give instances, and make people answer you in that moment, and let that then be your guide the next time you go to the ballot.
Well, we're going to continue to see more and more and more about this case. People are gathering as we speak in Minneapolis because in a time in which people feel so vulnerable, so many of us cannot afford health care. And even if we have good insurance, the insurance is not enough. It doesn't give you the assurance that you will not go into bankruptcy trying to stay well. More and more of us are making a good salary, but it's not enough. It's just not enough. We've had $10 billion cut from childcare programs. We've had $1 trillion cut from our health care. We now don't have officers of the peace or officers in law enforcement. You see that change in the language. So now what we're doing is beating people down, not lifting them up. That's not going to work ultimately. And I saw a comment that, she couldn't have been shot in her toes. Well, she shouldn't have been shot in her face. You could have shot her in her arm. Or you could have just shot the tire so her car couldn't move.
Right.
Why do you have to shoot a person? And maybe it's because Renee Good is not your sister or your daughter or your friend or your loved one. But somebody's life, a whole lot of people's lives are poorer tonight because that young woman is gone. And for her mother to have had to go to that morgue to identify her child who had been shot in the face more than once, I ask you, even if you feel that she weaponized your car, have some compassion for her and for her family. It appears to me that she was frightened. And that would be frightening. All you had to do was shoot out her tires. That's all you had to do. And if she escalated, then you could escalate appropriately. But you didn't have to kill her. You didn't have to do that.
Let us take that as a moment to remind ourselves about what we often talk about here, and that is how to react when engaging with law enforcement.
I got 1 minute. You got it.
Okay. Not only know your rights, but know when to activate those rights when you are safe to do so. If you are detained by law enforcement, you will ask them first, am I free to go? If they don't answer you, you must assume that you are being detained. Then you will ask, if they tell you no or evade your questions, then you say, I will not talk without my lawyer, and simply stop talking. Literally stop talking. If you are asked if your car can be searched, your home can be searched, your person can be searched, you will reply with, I do not consent to any searches. That will cover your person, your body, your car, your home. That's it. That's really it. And that's all. And for those of you who want to activate and be advocates, please try to do so in a safe way. Be sure that you are in a place with people who are either legal observers, where there are other attorneys, where you know that there is strength in numbers, where you know there are people who know how to document and do so safely. This was a tragedy of epic proportion that we should not take lightly. But I encourage all of us, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So know your rights, know when to activate your rights, and make sure that you stay safe as you do so.
The
And
West.
your phone is your best friend. Use that phone, record, record, record.
If you want to know more about any of the rights that I've just talked about, you can reach us at the westsidejustice.org. That's westsidejustice.org at the Westside Justice Center.
And then, of course, every Tuesday, the Transformative Justice Coalition, the chair and the founder are on WOL in Washington, D.C. You've got to have this show. I know you're going to be talking about this sometime next week. I know you've got to.
Absolutely.
Got to, because this is a big one. This is a big one. And I hope that we can learn from it. I'm so glad that all of you, whatever your viewpoints, I'm so glad that you came out today. Ari, our new dear friend, beloved, from Brazil, I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope that you're getting something from this. And certainly we're praying for our brothers and sisters to the South, we know you are struggling to tap into your wealth and use it for the good of the people, of the many, of the most, not a few. We thank you for that. We thank you for standing and aligning yourself with the downtrodden of the world. That is what you are holding on to. There is a lot at stake in the overtaking of these governments in Venezuela, in Brazil, in Argentina. Be very clear, this right-wing takeover, there's a lot to uncover here, a lot to uncover. But we who believe in freedom cannot rest, and we should not. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never has, it never will. So everybody, let's grow up and let us take our country and make it what it's supposed to be, and then by extension make the world a better place, because we can. Thank you, Diana Ross and the Supremes. I am Santita Jackson, Attorney Tanya Woods, Westside Justice Coalition, and of course the chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Westside Justice Center, Westside Justice Center and the Transformative Justice Coalition, Attorney Darrell Jones. I am Santita Jackson. Hey, if you have any other questions, go to rainbowpush.org and call us at 773-FREEDOM. As we're going into the King weekend, that is what we're going into. And ask yourself what Dr. King would do in this moment. Ask yourself that. Ask yourself that. I don't think that he wants to see anyone shot in the face. We can do not just better than that, we can do right by people. I am Santita Jackson, everybody. God bless you. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.